Okay, back talking about aviation, and this situation with Qantas is developing, Martin. Have you seen that the Virgin CEO is slamming Qantas debt guarantee? Qantas have got the handout to the federal government to guarantee their debt through what is being described here on the ABC website from Australia as a financial crisis for Qantas.
Yes. And I don't think the government's going to be in too much of a mood to help them out, judging by how the car companies fared.
Well, here's an interesting thing. The change of government and the Abbott administration in place now, you'd expect them to be more purist in their economic policies, wouldn't you?
That whole thing's quite interesting because Ford announced their closure just before the government changed. Holden announced that they're closing. Toyota have now announced that they're closing. Now Qantas wants money. I don't think it comes down to purity. I think it just comes down to the availability of cold hard cash to give them, and I don't think there is any.
Well, I can see why the Virgin CEO would be upset about that. John Borghetti, who used to work for that group, of course, so he knows all the ins and outs, I'm sure. But, you know, you've got to ask, what is the future of Qantas now? Especially international, given that they have the Emirates hookup, and we were just talking before the device started to roll, you know, their partner airline is upping their A380 capacity to 619 seats.
Yeah.
You know, are they going to become a regional carrier, Qantas?
Well, maybe their strategy is to retrench on the international routes simply because they make more money domestically, and international's always been a bit of a problem for Qantas.
But they used to be very good at it.
Yeah.
So something's gone wrong.
Well, some would argue that they had the wrong planes. Battling on with those old 7.6s and 7.4s for so many years probably cost them a bundle.
Well, that probably was to avoid, spending too much through that time. And they had, the A380s coming on and plenty of A330s. They were spending. But it doesn't look good for this outfit. I wonder how much they're going to blame Alan Joyce for this.
Yeah, it's
obviously got to blame someone, mate.
And he's a foreigner, so he'll be the fall guy.
Yeah. Will, though, the Australian public and the government tolerate what has become, for a very long time, the global sort of branding icon, that kangaroo, in all parts of the world, as a national symbol and almost part of foreign policy it has been over the years? Are they happy to let that go, do you think?
I think there'll still be enough Qantas planes flying around the world to their key destinations that will still be manageable. They'll still be flying to LA, London, New York, all through Asia. But on the routes that they were really battling to service, like Frankfurt and the secondary cities around the UK and all that type of thing, well, I think they've just given it to Emirates.
Borghetti's saying that, or is accusing Qantas of peddling myths to twist the government's arm. So, it's down and dirty.
Richard Branson even had a go at the government.
Yeah, of course, and now he's trumpeting up Air New Zealand. He's a mate of Air New Zealand now.
Yeah.
I remember when Virgin Australia started, and I forget the name of the guy who was the CEO at the time. He was a young dude, Brett Godfrey, I think his name was. And they came and visited Wellington in the brand new 737-700, and I went and filmed it, and I got an interview with him. And, he was slamming Air New Zealand. Air New Zealand's been ripping off the public. Air New Zealand claims to be a great airline. They're not a great airline. Our equipment is newer, da-da-da.
It's amazing how quickly things change,
12, 15 years later, it's like Sir Richard Branson saying that, Air New Zealand's one of the best airlines in the world. It's a rock star of airlines, run really well, and we're really pleased to be next to them.
Partners, strategic partners.
There you go, hey?
Yeah.
And not too long between those two positions.
No, well, they're not really positions, are they? Or temporary positions.
Yeah, so anytime you see someone saying something, you've got to put that filter on it. Yeah, maybe in 10 years it'll all be different.
Yeah, pinch of salt.
So, and where does this leave Air New Zealand? I see they've just received an A320 this month. Yeah, and number 9 coming next month. So I guess every time one arrives, a 737 goes.
Yeah, off to the Macca's yard.
But I got to say, the fern thing on the tail, it's sort of growing on me.
Yeah, it's a bit generic, but yeah, black and a fern. Yeah.
Yeah. And we talked in the last... Yeah, well, that's what it is, black and a fern. Yeah. Good on you, Martin. You got it.
Yeah, I got it.
They researched. They did the focus groups
Cost them millions and,
to get to that.
Black and Fern.
We talked about in the last program that whole partnership with Singapore Airlines and how it seemed like it might put Auckland in in a limited hub situation,
Yep.
right, between Asia and South America. Well, I see now in the Herald, Grant Bradley, one of their aviation comments guys, saying just that. That's what this means.
Get those 787-900 zipping across the South Pacific.
And accompanying it with a big push in tourism promotion in those markets.
Yep.
Makes perfect sense.
Auckland could get quite busy.
And everybody wins.
Mm.
That's the good thing. Singapore wins because at the back of the whole thing, you can go all the way back to there if you're from.
Yep.
But Auckland wins too because you got to stop here.
Yeah.
So that looks like a very
It's
promising
gonna be very
relationship.
good. Yeah.
I wonder if we'll see any reaction though from LAN. Well, Airliness is out of the picture, isn't
They're
it?
all bankrupt. And
Really? LAN even?
uh,
They seem to be doing pretty well.
I think though, on that long thin route across the South Pacific, I just don't think they were carrying. They just weren't carrying much.
Yeah, well, you need to have that component where you can tap into Asia.
Yeah, and they had no one.
Their source was only coming from here in Australia, weren't
Yeah,
they? Though
pretty much.
those two carriers are still. Are they still to Sydney?
Yes, I do believe they're Sydney, but they've stopped off the Auckland thing.
Yeah. Obvious destination, Sao Paulo.
Actually, one went right over
Brazil?
Wellington the other day. A Airlines Argentina's plane.
Oh, right.
I saw a plane heading due east, and I had a look on Flight Radar 24, and it was an A340 at 610 knots and 38,000 feet,
Whoa.
steaming east.
Right over top of Wellington.
Right over Wellington.
Why were they so far north?
Come from Sydney.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Must have been a jet stream.
It must have been something, because 610 knots, so it was moving.
Okay, well, the MFAT study, I'm just reading here, talking about Latin American opportunities. They're saying that Brazil offers the most opportunity.
Well, yeah, it's the biggest and richest.
It's the biggest, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're talking Sao Paulo.
Yeah,
So that'd be good, wouldn't
that
it?
would be very good.
Okay.
Yeah, an interesting way to get to Europe, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because then you could carry on,
Yeah.
keep on going.
With TAM.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's about time we rolled the clip, Martin, and this is another one of my amazing 737-200 tail cam pieces of footage. This is coming to Queenstown, approach and landing to runway 05, and you go round the back of Queenstown through this sort of valley, out over the lake, and then a right-hand turn right around, almost 360, and up Frankton Arm to runway 05. So it's a huge view. It's a huge perspective from a tail. Enjoy. Speaking of huge, we've talked about Turkish before, and how they're sort of trying to be an Emirates-y type, big operation global using, Istanbul as the hub.
Istanbul, and that's their major constraint, actually. The airport's a disaster. It's too small.
People have been saying, when are they going to get A380s?
Ta-da! They're looking to wet lease 4 A380s for this summer, so that's obviously they're dipping their toe in the water in quite a big way.
Where would they get those from?
Well, this is a question which is occupying a lot of people at the moment. Emirates are going to have to curtail some flights up until the end of July while they redo one of the runways at their airport, so they would have extra capacity potentially.
So they physically just can't get the
Apparently not.
metal off the ground.
But the likelihood of Emirates giving
Yeah.
aircraft to what could amount to being their arch rival is unlikely.
I don't think they'd do that, would they?
China Southern's not utilising all of their A380s as much as they could due to issues with rights to land and all this type of things. But they've only got 5.
Though, also, would they be wanting to brand these aircraft?
That hasn't been said yet.
You'd want to do that, wouldn't you?
I think you would. I think Turkish certainly would. If they want to dip their toe in the water, that's certainly what they do. Of course, Qantas got some A380s that they're probably not using that much. But on the other hand, Qantas don't have many, and the alternative would be to put even more expensive old 747s on those routes. So we don't know, but it is interesting. Somebody even suggested Air France might lease a couple, and who knows? They might get 2 from one airline, 1 from another airline, and 1 from somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it would be quite an expensive. Take 4 different planes, paint them all up.
These companies aren't dumb. People know that the ambitions of Turkish Airlines, and by sort of leasing them some aircraft or making them available to them is almost, in a way, hastening your own demise, potentially.
It is potentially. And I guess if they could get them from within the alliance group that they're in, that would be the best deal, but that looks unlikely because they're Star Alliance, Turkish Airlines.
Well, you might be seeing an airline that wants to that's leasing some that wants to offload them. That's not working. So
Yeah.
that's the way that goes.
But it'll be very interesting because if that works for Turkey, I think we'll know then where those 20 Airbus A380s that were just sold at the Singapore show might be going. Because
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Were they previously indicated? Or is this a new announcement?
It was confirmed at the show. They had said that they were thinking of it, but at the Singapore Airshow, they ordered 20.
So the Singapore Airshow was last week.
Yep.
And the A350 went there. I see the Dreamliner was there, Qatar Airlines Dreamliner. They're facing off against each other.
Yep.
Now, back not too long ago, my impression is that show was quite relevant. It was quite big, but it doesn't seem to have had a huge impact like the Dubai show or something
I just think this year there just wasn't a lot happening. I mean, I think an order for 20 A380s is big. The orders for Embraer got some of their new generation E-jets sold. Bombardier sold a couple of planes. But of course, the star of the show was the A350, and that's not old hat, but it's been flying for a few months now, so there was nothing really, truly new happening there. But
they're showing it off to a potentially huge market area, aren't they?
Yes, and more about that later actually, because there's some interesting analysis out of the Asian market. So they took the A350. Singapore Airlines pilots flew it apparently on 2 occasions.
Oh, there you go.
Airbus also announced the opening of a joint training facility with Airbus in Singapore. So that's interesting.
Well, that incentivizes the Singapore Inc. part of the equation.
Yeah. And, Singapore are coming up to make a very big order soon for 777 replacements, and we wonder which way that will go. Current market share in that part of Asia is Airbus 82% of the market.
Well, that's huge.
That is huge.
Okay, that is massive.
That is massive.
To fight to reclaim, if you're Boeing, I mean, that's a huge fight.
Well, it's coming off the back of the announcement of the Neo, so obviously that might be a short-term blip as everyone flocks to this new plane.
But that obviously suits that marketplace better, that aircraft, doesn't it?
Yes.
Otherwise, they'd be buying
Maxes. No one's buying Maxes. I think
no.
At the A321 level, the A321 versus the 737-9 Max, it's Airbus 3-1.
Yeah, 82%.
Yeah.
Also, there's manufacturing going on too, isn't there, in China?
Yes.
And when you're talking about these extra deals in Singapore, I mean, that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
You got to put down firm roots all over the place to make it worth their while, right?
Rolls-Royce have got an engine assembly plant in Singapore now.
Yeah.
So this Boeing analysis...
We could be doing that sort of thing, Martin.
Yeah, we could, I suppose.
Yeah.
Boeing have done some analysis, and they reckon over the next 20-25 years there's going to be $1.9 trillion worth of aircraft sales.
Trillion.
In that part of the world.
Yeah.
And they're seeing what they can do to get as much of that as possible.
Well, of course.
Their major, not problem, but challenge at the moment will be they were basically forced to announce the 777-9 and 8X probably a bit too early.
So they were a bit frog-marched into it, were they?
Yes, because the A350-1000 is turning out to be quite popular.
Right.
There is rumour of an A350-1100, which is an even bigger version, which would go straight into 999X territory.
Because I've got to say, looking at those pictures, it's a lot of height off the ground. It can take quite a bit of stretch, you can see.
Yes. And the worry for Boeing is that Asia does certainly seem to be Airbus's to lose at the moment.
And here's the other thing. Do you say to lose or to lose? The Americans, they've had a bad rap politically. I mean, look, Indonesia, for example.
Yeah.
They've been spied on. The president's phone's been hacked.
Yeah.
The information's been given to the Americans. There's a perception out there, Angela Merkel calling for a European internet system to disconnect from the United States. They could be starting to suffer, the intangible consequences of that sort of negativity reflected in 82% market share for Airbus in Asia.
Yeah,
and ongoing problems. That could be an ongoing issue for these.
You reap what you sow.
Yeah, that's profound.
It is very
profound.
Isn't it? Yeah. ANA, the Japanese airline, they are just about they will announce soon the winners of their RFP for large twin jets. So The money was on 777 a few years back. Who knows?
Well, that's the other big news of the week, is the announcement that they will make the wing in Seattle, right?
Yeah, carbon fiber wing in Seattle.
So do you think the Japanese were at any point expecting to get that work?
Well, I think they developed the manufacturing processes, they own the tooling, and they make the wings for the 787, a carbon fiber wing. I would have thought they'd had a very good chance.
Well, part of the deal would have been, don't worry, later on when we do new stuff, you're right in on the development of it. You're already set up. It's good to go.
It's all ready to go, yeah.
Be part of the sales message to get them involved in that way.
So it doesn't look like the Japanese are going to be too involved in the 777.
So what does that mean for them? That's what I'm getting to. What does
Yeah.
it mean for the ANA or
Well, who knows? Maybe ANA have made their decision.
Well, if the government's grumpy, if the Japanese government is grumpy about that,
Mm-hmm.
or a certain section of the business community is grumpy, projected back to the political level, then, correct me if I'm wrong, but, someone gets on the phone to the head of ANA and we're not very happy with Boeing. Don't buy.
It wouldn't surprise me, yeah, if that type of thing happens there. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Keep the Europeans
Because
happy
you'd be a
enough.
bit pissy, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and the Japanese do have to diversify. They do have to try something else because a lot of stuff ain't working for them too well.
So do you
over
think
there.
that was a money decision or a wider decision staying in Seattle?
Yeah, well, after all the labour problems Boeing's had and all the manufacturing problems they had with their planes recently, I think it was a bit of both. Bring
Right.
it home, keep it in-house, and see if we can keep our labour happy. Because
Yeah.
without happy labour, they ain't going nowhere anyway.
Well, everyone knows that.
Yeah.
That's 101, isn't it?
You'd think
Do you
so.
think they forgot that?
I think they did for a while.
All right. I see that BA 747-400 that trashed the building with its wing at Johannesburg. They're going to write it off.
Really?
Yeah. Apparently
Wow.
the wings twisted right to the wing box.
Jeez, you wouldn't think a brick building could do that to a 747.
A lot of energy in there, I suppose.
I suppose so. And it was far out at the end of the wing,
Yeah,
so
right
it
at
would be
the
a
end.
huge moment on a day.
And I see it hadn't been too long out of a major check. It's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah,
So I guess what they do, they strip all the usables out of it,
I guess.
which is a lot.
Yeah, the interior,
I
all
mean,
that
it's good
type
for
of
the
thing.
parts
Yeah.
inventory.
Yeah, especially
And-
since it's all just been checked, so it'll all be
Sell
good
the
stuff.
airframe. Sell the airframe. Put it on
Yeah.
Trade Me, like the Qantas one.
Yeah.
130K.
Wow.
We should buy that.
Yeah,
You should go and borrow the money.
I don't know where we'd put it.
Well, you'd need a bit of room, but
On the Days Bay jetty.
it would look fantastic, wouldn't it? I'd sleep on the upper deck, I think. Come on up. Yeah, so that's a write-off.
Wow. I wonder how they're going to get it out of Johannesburg. Do you think
They'll
you don't
pull
think
it
it's
apart
flyable
there.
at all?
It's probably flyable, but the whole thing's damn. You'd have to repair the ailerons and everything. You'd just part it out there.
Yeah. it's
I
gonna
mean,
be a big
SAA
job.
have got experience with that type, haven't they?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, so no
Yes.
problem.
No.
But another one bites the dust.
On a much smaller scale, there's been another air crash. A Twin Otter out of Kathmandu crashed. Yeah.
Yeah, once every 3-4 years, you get that.
It was on
Sightseeing?
on its way to Jumla.
Oh. Have you seen that Lukla airport?
Yeah. Jeez.
Whoa, they've had a few crashes there. What's the other one they operate there? The Dornier.
The Dornier. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the Indians made that, didn't they?
They do make them.
So that's probably why they're big
Yeah.
there.
And they're still making them. They make
Yeah.
them, and they're making the new generation version there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, this Twin Otter flew into a mountain in bad weather with 18
Oh,
people
dear.
on board.
Used to be a big place, Kathmandu, around Nepal, for Hawker Siddeley 748s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what was the Air Nikon, I think, was the airline that flew there. They had maintenance base there, and yeah, if you wanted to go and see a 748 for a lot of the time, you go there.
3 years to go.
Go for a flight around Everest in one.
That would have been cool.
Did the Indians ever make them? I think they did.
I think they did.
Yeah.
I think they just
And that-
made about anything the British stopped making.
And that, yeah. Well, they're still making the Morris Oxford, aren't they?
Yeah.
Or whatever they call
And they
it.
made the Nat for a while, didn't they?
Yeah, that's
They
right,
called
the
it-
fighter.
It was called the Ajit.
Ah,
And then they made the Sepakat Jaguar, and they still fly them. They're
Oh,
the only
yeah.
people to fly them.
they've got the big undercarriage, haven't they? You can land them on
Yes.
motorways and,
Yeah, similar to a
Fields of-
Mirage F1.
yeah, you
They
land
have
them
that
in
sort of-
paddocks.
They look like sort of insect legs that,
Yeah.
that can torted and folded up.
So when
into the
every runway's
fuselage.
been bombed, you can still fly your Jaguar around.
Yeah, except because they had such small engines, they needed about 10 k's to take off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see that United Airlines are flying 737s with these new winglets. What do they call them? Scimitar winglets?
Scimitar, yeah.
And people are making out that they're sort of somehow new.
Yeah, no.
But they look like the ones that McDonnell Douglas tried out on a DC-10 in 81.
Yeah, and then put on the MD-11.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
there's nothing
they're
new about them
new
at all. No.
So what's that going to do?
3%, they reckon, in fuel consumption.
3%.
Yes, but I suspect that's not 3% better than wingletted ones, I think that's 3% better than the baseline. So,
okay.
So a bit of a percent better than the wingletted ones.
It's all in the way you say it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it looks pretty cute, I got to say.
Yeah, it kind of looks a bit sort of insectoid, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's going to be the one that goes on the Max.
Yes.
Is that right?
Similar.
Will they put them on? Is there any talk of putting them on 7.6s?
Yes,
or
there is.
7.5s?
United will be putting them on the 7.6s and the 7.5s. Yeah.
Because they must still have a lot of them.
They do.
And Boeing studying a 7.5 replacement. There's irony for you.
Apparently they're tired of the A321 eating their lunch in the States.
Yeah. Trouble is, though, if they're going to bring out a new aircraft, that A321 is going to go through about another 3 or 4 morphs and
yes, exactly.
in performance enhancement before they even get something out the door.
Well, they're already doing very well with the A321, and it's not even the Neo.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you wait until the Neo hits the flight
We
line.
sound like Airbus fanboys. You realise that?
We're not really, though.
No.
No.
It just seems to be the way it sort of shakes out all the time.
In terms of development and what's happening out there,
Yeah.
now that the 787's slowly coming right, there's really not much else out there.
Yeah.
Unless the Russians develop something interesting. They had a mock-up of their MS-21 at Singapore, sort of a cabin mock-up and a cockpit mock-up. That's quite an interesting plane. That will seat from 160 to 230.
Is that a jet?
It's a jet, yeah. It's basically to compete, slightly larger competitor to the 7.3s and the Airbus A320 series. Yeah, so that'd be quite interesting and should be very efficient. Of course, probably only Russian airlines will buy it, but judging by the reaction from that Mexican airline, which is now running the Sukhoi Superjet, I mean, they seem very happy.
Yeah.
They say it's performing really well.
Yeah. There's a picture of one of them flying with the engine cowl open, though. Do you see that?
Maybe it needed a bit of extra cooling, like a larder. You just pop the bonnet open.
Okay, aircraft of the day. This is almost like you sort of close your eyes and point, and whatever you land on is the aircraft of the day. And we sort of did that in this case, but it's a good aircraft. The Convair 580.
Yeah, great plane. Always a highlight. Not that I'm that sad, but it is always nice to
Yes,
look
it
up
is.
in the sky
You
and
are sad.
to see the Chatham's
Yeah.
580 coming into Wellington with us trailing a bit of smoke behind it, as always.
That aircraft was, I think, a really great example of American thinking in the 50s. Build it big, build it really capable, and let it have an endless life.
Well, it started out as the 240, didn't it? Then went 340. I'm not sure if there was a 440, and then there was a 540, 60, 80.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
And everything started with piston engines.
Yeah.
And also, a lot of them were ordered by the US military, the Navy and the Air Force.
Yes.
They had a lot of them for transports,
They took a
VOP
lot.
transports. Back in the early post-Second World War empire building phase, they had to get a lot of people around the place. But it really came into its own with the conversion to turboprop power.
But even, you look at old photos of airport ramps in the 60s, even in Europe,
Yeah.
there were lots of them.
Well, Swiss Air.
Yeah. And these are the piston engine ones. And
Yeah.
the American Airlines ran, it was their feeder liner.
All the big airlines had them. American Airlines, Delta Airlines, they all had them. There was a competitor aircraft, pretty similar. I think it was made by Martin. Martin.
Yes.
It was made by Martin. First flight in 1947, so just moments after the war.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and I remember talking to the guy who runs Air Chatham's because I've flown on that plane, and this was only about 10 years ago, and he said that in the business model that he had for his operation, there was only one aircraft in the world that made it viable, and it was this aircraft.
The 580.
Everything else, the aircraft was either not as capable or too expensive to operate or too expensive to buy. Now, that 580 could take 5 tons of freight and 40 passengers in one go
Wow.
at 300 knots.
300 odd knots.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks very capable and very big when you see it flying around, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Now, there's the rights to that aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go back a bit. So, up until the 500 series, they were all piston powered.
Hmm.
When they went to 5, the first engine they tried to put in was the Napier Eland turboprop. Not many of them had that. They
Right.
tried with Rolls-Royce.
Was that unreliable?
Probably just difficult to
Yeah,
get.
yeah.
Well, and of course, being British, all the bolt head sizes would have been different randomly.
Well, you'd think the Dart, but was the Dart not around
they
earlier?
tried the Dart. That was the 600.
Okay.
But they settled.
yes.
They settled on the Allison engine, which basically they put a Herc engine in there.
Right.
Yeah.
The Allison 501.
The Allison 501. Yeah, with those big sort of spade-tip props.
4-bladed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the rights to that aircraft, how do you say, the manufacturing rights and all the certificates.
The intellectual property ownership, yep.
It's owned by a company called Kelowna Flightcraft in Canada.
Canadian, yeah.
And they make a very interesting plane. It's called the CV 5800. They added a 0 to it.
Right.
And that's a stretch, like a long stretch.
Okay.
With a glass cockpit and the business.
Wow.
And that's sold as a packet freighter.
So what, do they cannibalize another aircraft to
You can
splice in a fuselage section or something?
You can take anything. You can even take the earliest CV240.
Right.
The old piston one from the 40s or 50s.
And use the airframe.
Because the airframe is like a Dakota airframe. It has no life. So you can take a 240 and they'll patch it into a 5800.
Yeah.
Which is that's an amazing change.
So as a package freighter, that's huge capacity.
Yeah.
Are there any passenger versions? There must be.
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, I've seen them, because at Auckland there are a couple.
Yes.
Of the stretched ones.
Yes. There's
and they
often
almost
one
look more in profile or more naturally profiled than the shorter one.
The only thing that makes them look old-fashioned is the profile of the
windscreen.
Profile of the vertical stabilizer.
Ah, right. Okay.
But what one Canadian company's done is they've blacked out the curves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Stretched by 14 feet.
Yeah, it's a big stretch.
Yeah. First private aircraft used in a U.S. presidential campaign.
Oh, yeah?
Flying John F. Kennedy, aircraft was called Caroline, named after his daughter, around America in 1960 during his campaign, now preserved at the National Air and Space Museum.
But have you noticed when the Chatham's Air one flies over, if you look at it, have you noticed that sometimes the engine seems to pulse?
Yeah.
And it like sort of puffs out.
They're smoky anyway, those engines.
They are smoky, just like the Hercules,
Yeah.
Or the P3, the same engine.
1960 purchase price for a used Convair 240, £40,000.
Gee.
Pretty cheap, isn't it?
It is pretty cheap.
Back in the day.
And particularly popular down here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there you go. All the way to the Chathams. What, it's about an hour and 45? It's the only thing that heads east.
Yeah,
isn't it?
really, yeah.
Yeah. Nice aircraft. Your seafood is coming on that thing.
Yeah, I suppose mussels and all that, and crayfish from the Chathams will
seen
be
them
on that
loaded
thing,
up. Yeah, 5 tons worth every day.
Jeez.
In fact, they've got a Cessna that flies to Pitt Island. They gather up the crayfish, and everything else is at the airport. They load it all on, Wellington or Christchurch, and literally by the afternoon, it's in Auckland, going into the hold to go to the States and beyond. It's amazing.
So Chatham's flies to Christchurch, right?
I think they still do, yeah.
Wellington.
Yep.
Napier.
I don't know about Napier.
Yeah, they do, because
they used to. I don't know if they do now. There was a scheduled monthly service to the Chathams from Wellington, operated, I think, for NAC by the Air Force, using a Sunderland flying boat and landing at the lagoon at the Chathams. Take off from Evans Bay. Once a month.
Probably took them about that long to get there and back anyway.
That's right. Ages ago, you mentioned something called the Hoverbike.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking, okay, that was a long time ago, and it was in development, I think, then.
It's still in development.
And now this thing is like a flying machine.
It's basically a cross between a miniature Chinook and a motorbike.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I can visualize
So it's like a motorbike. It's got just handlebars, everything like a motorbike. Out instead of a front wheel, you've got basically a 1500 millimeter fan, and where the back wheel would be, you've got another 1500 millimeter fan.
Right.
And there's this Kiwi guy who studied aeronautics in Australia.
Yep.
Got his helicopter pilot's license. Got his mechanical engineering degree.
Yep.
And he is interested in developing this thing he's calling the Hoverbike.
Okay.
And if anybody's interested, they should go and have a look at www.hover-bike.com.
Someone else got Hoverbike all the one word.
I guess. But it looks pretty interesting.
Where's he up to?
Tethered prototype flying.
Oh, okay.
But he also makes a radio-controlled model that people can buy, and he's using some of the proceeds of that to fund development.
So is that a model of his hoverbike?
It's a hoverbike that small.
Yeah.
Maybe 50 centimeters long.
Right.
That you can fly around inside.
Great.
But it's pretty interesting. I think people should go and have a look.
Yeah. Hoverbike.
It's
Hover-bike.
Hover-bike.com.
Right.
Chris Malloy, he's from the Auckland area.
And do you think he's got something?
Yeah, I do. I've seen the full-scale prototype. A friend of mine's helping him out, and I went and helped them lift the engine out of it because he was sending that off for wear tests and checking. Mm-hmm. It is very, very interesting. And today, with the modern sensors, which are very cheaply available, like solid-state gyroscopes and all this type of thing, he reckons he'll be able to get the control system to be basically really dumb.
Right.
You know, just
And that, I imagine, is a big component of it.
yeah,
because
auto stabilization, all this type of thing is all part of the design.
Mr. Average Johnny can get on it and go.
And the interesting thing is, you can either Mr. Average Johnny can get on it and go, or you don't have to get on and go, and you can fly it remotely, because you could also use it as a UAV.
Lovely.
Yeah. He learned to fly on Robinson R-22s.
Yeah.
And he spoke to people in the cattle mustering business.
Yeah.
And it was really dangerous, because you hit your
Yes.
rotors you're flying at sort of 10 feet, you hit a tree, you're finished.
Yeah, totally.
And because this hoverbike uses ducted fans, you could fly through the tree.
Yeah.
And
Like on Star Wars.
pretty much like on Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good that
Maybe
you
he's
know,
inspired by that.
well, whatever, but I think it's good that people are thinking along these lines.
I want
and
one of those things. If he can make, I'd be interested. I'd
Yeah.
love to get around like that.
Yeah.
Think about that.
I reckons it'll do 150 knots, get up to 10,000 feet if you had to. The production model would have ballistic chutes and all this
Yeah.
type of thing. It looks very, very cool, all carbon fiber. At the moment, he's using a BMW Boxer engine, 80 horsepower to fly it, and he says that's plenty of power.
Wow.
And so, like I said, when I was there, he was taking the engine out, not because there's anything wrong. He just wanted to send it back to BMW and get all the tolerances checked to see that it wasn't putting too much strain on the engine. Because, of
Right.
course, an aero engine as opposed to a motorbike engine, they both might produce 200 horsepower, but the aero engine's producing closer to its maximum constantly, whereas your motorbike, you
Yes.
might only ever produce maximum once a week.
Yeah,
once
so
a
you
month.
need a reliability
So, yeah.
factor there.
But no, it looks great. So yeah, go and have a look and see what you think, and maybe buy a radio-controlled model if you feel like it.
All right, so we'll see you again soon. Paul Brennan in Wellington.
And Martin Noakes in Wellington.
See you later.
Cheers.